The writings of young trans men reveal a group of notably sensitive and clever people. The more of their accounts of gender dysphoria I've read, with their insightful descriptions of anxiety, dissociation, eating disorders, self-harm, and self-hatred, the more I've wondered whether if I'd been born 30 years later, I too might have tried to transition. The allure of escaping womanhood would have been huge. I struggled with severe OCD as a teenager. If I'd found community and sympathy online that I couldn't find in my immediate environment, I believe I could have been persuaded to turn myself into the son my father had openly said he'd have preferred. It sucks that her father openly said to her that he wished she was a boy. Any trans person will sympathize with that. That is not okay behavior on the part of a parent. However, this paragraph is implying that trans men only want to transition to escape the hardships of being a woman. Here's the thing, it is incredibly difficult to explain gender dysphoria to someone who has never experienced it. I cannot explain what it feels like because it doesn't feel like anything else that I have ever experienced. So it is easy to focus on the things that Rowling lists here, anxiety, dissociation, eating disorder, self-harm, and so on, because those are things that people understand. But that's not all there is. It is different. And again, I cannot explain how it is different. So just because you have experienced anxiety and self-harm and self-hatred and all of that in your teens doesn't mean that you would have been helped by transitioning, unless all of that anxiety and self-harm and self-hatred was directed at your own gender, your own biological sex. I can't explain it. Also, I know people with OCD, and as far as I know, they have never considered transitioning in an attempt to, cure their OCD? That's another irrelevant thing to even bring up. I don't understand why she did it. Then follows another paragraph that I'm not going to read out loud. Again, you can pause if you want to read it yourself. Basically, she is saying that it makes sense for women to want to become men because women are discriminated against, which makes no sense because trans people do not escape being discriminated against. And then she says, as I didn't have a realistic possibility of becoming a man in the 1980s, it had to be books and music that got me through both my mental health issues and the sexualized scrutiny and judgment that set so many girls to war against their bodies in their teens. Fortunately for me, I found, and so on. Basically, books and music told her that it's okay to be confused and to be not stereotypically female. You can be a girl anyway. Again, ironic because this is exactly the thing we're saying about trans women. They don't have to be biological female or even be particularly feminine to be women. Basically, this entire paragraph it's implying that if you are feeling confused about your gender identity, you do not have to seek medical help and therapy for it. You can just read books and listen to music and you will find yourself. This is not the case for people who are actually experiencing gender dysphoria. This is actually a very, very dangerous thing to say to them. If you are experiencing gender dysphoria, or if you think that might be what you are experiencing, seek help from medical professionals and therapists who know things about transgender issues, because they can help you figure out what it is you're experiencing and how to best help you. Books and music are great, but they are not the answer to gender dysphoria. Next paragraph reads, I want to be very clear here. I know transition will be a solution for some gender dysphoric people, although I'm also aware through extensive research that studies have consistently shown that between 60 and 90% of gender dysphoric teens will grow out of their dysphoria. Yes, many teens who question their gender identity will settle on it matching their biological sex, or at least settle on transitioning not being for them. This is good. This is not a problem. And the doctors and psychiatrists and everyone who is actually an expert in this field tend to be pretty good at helping teens decide where they are before they suggest any drastic measures like hormones or surgery. She's not mentioning that in this part of the essay, but that is the case. These teenagers will question their gender identity. They will talk to professionals who will help them come to a conclusion of what their gender identity is and how best to help, if help is needed. Next bit, again and again, I've been told to just meet some trans people. I have. In addition to a few younger people who were adorable, I happen to know a self-described transsexual woman who's older than I am and wonderful. Although she's open about her past as a gay man, I've always found it hard to think of her as anything other than a woman, and I believe and certainly hope she's completely happy to have transitioned. First, is it just me, or is it super patronizing to be referring to these younger trans people that she's met as adorable? It just rubs me the wrong way. Also, once again, I don't know anything about this trans woman that J.K. Rowling knows. I hope she's very happy. I am glad Rowling isn't misgendering her, but it is actually irrelevant that she has one transgender friend who may or may not be okay with her views on transgenderism, because she doesn't actually say that. Being older, though, she went through a long and rigorous process of evaluation, psychotherapy, and staged transformation. The current explosion of trans activism is urging a removal of almost all the robust systems through which candidates for sex reassignment were once required to pass. A man who intends to have no surgery and take no hormones may now secure himself a gender recognition certificate and be a woman in the sight of the law. Many people aren't aware of this. Again, I don't see a problem. Hormones and surgery are not required for you to be allowed to identify and be identified as the gender that you identify as. Also, again, I don't know how this law actually works, but I highly doubt that a person can just go say that, hey, I'm a woman, or hey, I'm a man, and get that gender recognition certificate. Yeah, again, I don't know this, but I'm pretty sure there are some safeguards in place. Don't quote me on that, though. What you can quote me on is that we are not urging the removal of these systems. We are urging for them to change. Many trans people who have gone through this have been asked irrelevant and invasive questions throughout the process of transitioning, or before we were allowed to start transitioning. I myself was asked if and how I masturbated and how I could be certain that I wasn't a woman since I had never had sex. This implies then that this psychiatrist thought that if I could enjoy having sex with my female genitalia, I couldn't possibly be a man. And there are just so many things wrong with that. So those are examples of the ridiculous inquiries that we want to remove. I'm not going to read this next one out loud either. She is saying that things have become worse for women since the 80s because of porn and the backlash against feminism. She brings up Trump, incels, and trans activists in the same sentence as apparently equal enemies to women. Very classy. I've read all the arguments about femaleness not residing in the sexed body and the assertions that biological women don't have common experiences, and I find them too deeply misogynistic and regressive. I am actually not sure what this sentence means. I'm not sure if she's being unclear or if it's just me, but I honestly can't seem to understand. What arguments is she saying that she has read, and how are they misogynistic and regressive? If she gave us some examples, I think maybe I would be able to answer this, but right now I don't know. It's also clear that one of the objectives of denying the importance of sex is to erode what some seem to see as the cruelly segregationist idea of women having their own biological realities, or, just as threatening, unifying realities that make them a cohesive political class. The hundreds of emails I've received in the last few days prove this erosion concerns many others just as much. It isn't enough for women to be trans allies. Women must accept and admit that there is no material difference between trans women and themselves. Again, the first part of this I do not follow. I don't know if this is a language thing, if it's on me or her, but I don't follow, so I can't comment on it. That last bit, though, about no material difference between trans women and cis women, no one is saying that there is no difference. I have been through this over and over and over again. Biological sex is real, biological sex matters, but it is not the end-all be-all. But as many women have said before me, woman is not a costume. Woman is not an idea in a man's head. Woman is not a pink brain, a liking for Jimmy Choos, I don't know what that is, or any of the other sexist ideas now somehow touted as progressive. Moreover, the inclusive language that calls female people menstruators and people with vulvas strike many women as dehumanizing and demeaning. I understand why trans activists consider this language to be appropriate and kind, but for those of us who'd had degrading slurs spat at us by violent men, it's not neutral, it's hostile and alienating. You are making these terms hostile and alienating. There is nothing innately in them that is hostile or alienating. Again, this installment of this whole issue started with Rowling tweeting about an article where she wanted the words people who menstruate replaced by women. I have explained in a previous video why people who menstruate and women are not equal. They do not mean the same thing. People who menstruate include women who do menstruate, but not women who don't. It includes trans men and non-binary people and gender fluid and anyone who menstruates regardless of if they identify as a man or a woman. Rowling is the one alienating the people who do not identify as women who menstruate by implying that you need to be called a woman to be allowed to menstruate. And I have never seen menstruators or person with vulva be thrown around as a slur or an insult. And if you take it that way, I'm sorry, but that's on you. So now let's talk about the fifth reason that Rowling is concerned. Yes, the past I don't know how many minutes have been only reason number 4.